for today. It's called The Dark, Dark Night. And it's written by Christina Butler. That means she's the author. And what does the author do?
Writes the words.
That's right, the author writes the words. And the illustrator, Jane Chapman, she draws the pictures. Okay, so do you see this little frog up here on top of his friend's head? He looks frightened. That means scared. I wonder why he's frightened or scared. Well, let's read and find out.
The pond monster.
Is there going to be a pond monster? Let's read and find out. I think you may have read this before, Claudia.
Me too.
Frog was very excited. All winter, he had been asleep under a stone. And now that it was spring, he was on his way back to his pond. So he had been hibernating all winter long. Hibernating is when you go to sleep for a long time. On the way, he bumped into Badger and Hedgehog. Then he played leapfrog with Rabbit and Mouse. Hop, hop. Suddenly, he saw that it was getting dark. So he borrowed a lantern from Mouse, and off he went through the woods to the pond. Ooh.
With the wind.
With the wind.
Said the lanterns.
Went the lantern as it swung from side to side. And the dark was all around. When Frog reached his home, he put the lantern down behind him and was just about to jump in the water when he saw a huge black pond monster with enormous, very big claws coming out of the reeds. Oh my goodness, look how enormous and big his claws are.
That's his shadow.
And look at his face. He looks frightened, very scared. Frog grabbed the lantern and hopped as fast as he could back through the woods. "There's a huge monster in the pond," he cried. "Are you sure?" laughed Hedgehog. Frog nodded, trembling. Trembling, that's when you shake because you're frightened. So Frog was so scared or frightened that he was trembling just like that, Hazel.
And tremble, that means you're shaking. That means I'm frightened. But when
Right.
I was frightened about
Okay.
my mommy,
All right.
I was shivering, and I just almost saw a fox.
Oh, I would be very frightened and tremble if I saw a fox, too. "All right," said Hedgehog calmly. "We'll have a look together." "And I'll come too," said Mouse. Off they went through the woods. Ooh.
Said the wind.
The wind blew in the trees.
Squeak, said the wind.
Went the lanterns. "Wait for me!" cried Mouse.
That's why Mom-
Look at how far back Mouse is. And the dark was all around. Soon, Hedgehog and Frog reached the pond. "Now," said Hedgehog, "where's this monster?" "There it is!" cried Frog. "It was bigger than before, with enormous claws." That means really big claws. "And terrible spikes down its back." "Run, run!" cried Hedgehog. "Pond monster! Pond monster!"
I was just your shadow.
Well, let's read and find out what the pond monster is. "What's all this?" chuckled Rabbit. "A monster? There's no such thing as a monster." Rabbit thinks they're imagining this pond monster.
But there
That
are.
means that they're make-believing it. They're
There
thinking
are.
of something in their head that's not real.
Well,
"Come and see for yourself," said Hedgehog, shivering. "All right," said Rabbit, "I will." "I'll never swim in my pond again," sniffed Frog as they set off in the woods. Ooh, blew the wind in the trees. Squeak, squeak, with the lanterns. "Wait for me!" cried Mouse. And the dark was all around. Well, they carry their lanterns, and so they go back they were all back at the pond, Rabbit, Hedgehog, and Frog tiptoed to the wire. There it was again, the big pond monster. It was bigger than ever. It had enormous, very long claws, terrible spikes down its back, 2 big horns, and wildly waving arms. I don't think Rabbit thinks they're imagining or making up the pond monster anymore. Run for your life, yelled Rabbit, racing back through the woods with Hedgehog and Frog close behind. What's going on? Asked Badger. So they told him all about it. Come along, Badger said. I'd like to see this monster of yours. And off they went once more. So they all ran away frightened from this pond monster. See, Rabbit didn't think that it was real. He thought they were imagining it until he saw the monster for himself. And now Badger doesn't look very frightened. He must think they're imagining the pond monster too. As soon as they reached the pond, a huge gust of wind came through the trees, whoosh, and blew out all the lanterns. I can't see a monster, said Badger at last. That's because it's too dark, whispered Frog. And they all stood, waiting in the moonlight for something to happen. Rabbit, Frog, and Hedgehog look frightened, but Badger still thinks they're imagining it. He thinks they're making it up. Just then, Mouse caught up with the others at last, because remember, every time they went, Mouse was far behind. He was little, so he was taking a long time. So Mouse caught up with the others. Yoo-hoo! He shouted, waving from the bank. Badger, Rabbit, and Hedgehog and Frog looked at Mouse, and then they looked at the small black shape waving from the reeds. Look at that, said Hedgehog. That's not a pond monster, said Rabbit. That's Mouse's shadow, said Frog. I can't believe it, said Badger. You were running from your shadows the whole time. That's right, Cole. They were imagining a pond monster. And it was really just their shadows.
I told you.
The 4 friends laughed and laughed. Hooray, cried Frog. There's no monster after all. And with a huge happy splash, he leaped into the lovely pond at last. So look at how relieved all of these friends are. They're so happy that they don't have to be worried anymore. They're relieved. The end. So you remember our frog here who was so frightened? Can anybody raise their hand and tell me why the frog was frightened?
Because he was scared.
Nice. Why was he scared?
Because the shadows were scary.
Because of the pond monster, which really was just
They were the pond monster.
That's right, Abby. They were the pond monster because it was just their shadow from the lantern behind them. Very good. All right. Thank you guys for listening to my story, The Dark